Today we're covering the last 4 sections of the analysis tool, and all of these have to do with getting your object ready to print. So I want to start by just making sure that we close our object so that it is ready to print. Okay, so we've got our bunny sitting here right in the center of the build platform. We go into the analysis, and what orientation does is it analyzes the rabbit. If you looked closely when that bar was moving across, it told you how many different orientations it was checking. And what it's trying to do is it's trying to find a balance between the strength, the support volume, and the support area. And if you notice, there's one arrow that's white, and then these other ones are kind of like a light pink color. That is showing you which one, like the white one, is the optimized one for what you told it. And right now, we're telling it that we want more emphasis placed on the support volume. If you switch this to 1 and this to 0, and you hit update, it's now going to try to find options that give the highest amount of strength. Okay, I never use this ever, and so I can't tell you all the ins and outs about it, but you can change what is considered the angle, and I believe that the support area has to do with how much right here is needed to be supported. The support volume maybe is the like as a whole the supports. And the strength has something to do with minimizing how weak spots. Okay, but I don't fully understand all of this just because I don't use it. Okay, and so play around with it as much as you like, but that's what I know, is that you can choose between different orientations, and if you put all of these at 0 and hit update, then it just kind of gives you, I don't know. I mean, this is kind of, I guess, looks like these are all just a bunch of different ones in these directions. So I guess maybe give it, and you can give them an order. You can say, I want you to first look at strength and then support volume, and then that will give you an idea on how to balance between those different things. Layout and packing works when you have more objects that you're trying to fit on a build platform. Right now I've got the MakerBot Replicator 2. I've never printed with that, but they do have in here a Form 2. So let's say I take my Form 2 and I'm going to turn on the object browser, and I'm going to make a bunch of these bunnies. And I'm just going to, down here, I'm going to click and click and click and click and click. Make a whole lot of rabbits. They're all there. You just don't see them because they're one on top of the other. But if I go into Layout Packing, what it's trying to do is it's trying to fit all of these bunnies onto my build platform. Well, if you look right here where it says move, it isn't rotating them, it's just moving it. But if I switch this to move and rotate and hit update, it's going to be able to kind of cram more on there. I don't recommend this one. In the playing around I did, if you do max quality, it really spends a lot more time thinking and doesn't really change a lot. Maybe it will have to fit those last 2 in there, but let's try a couple things. Packing style, this one's trying to start here and go left to right. Let's see if circular gets us anything better. Circular, I guess, is kind of working its way out, and then you can also switch to square. This border width is how far away from the edges right here, so we can bring that down because we can go all the way up to the edges with a Form 2. That's going to give us just a little more space. So see how that fits everybody on there? Let's give it a little bit of a border. Let's go with 1 millimeter and see. All right, everyone's still in there. And then this one's starting in the rear left corner, but if you put centered, then it tries to pack them towards the center. Now, out of curiosity, I'm going to go ahead and hit medium. No, let's go max. I might have to fast forward through this section, but let's see if it does a better job of fitting everything in here. All right, so as you see, we did all that and it didn't even fit everybody. So I think when we had this one, we were able, dang it. Yeah, I accidentally left it on max quality. So as you can see, we're able to get everything in there by tweaking some of the settings. This is nice because if you were going to print a lot of different things, positioning them yourself can be quite tedious. So I'm going to hit cancel, and I'm going to delete all of these and get back to just the one rabbit, and I'm going to turn off the build platform. Okay. And I want to go on to the next thing right here called overhangs. Overhangs is how you create supports in Mesh Mixer. And if you look, there's a whole lot of settings that you can play with to get the supports how you want them. And right now, we just have the generic ones on there. Sorry, I mean the default settings. Okay. And angle threshold, that's basically saying that if you were to look at, let me turn on the wireframes. If you were to come and look at some of these triangles, it is making a line that is along the y-axis, and then it's looking at the normals from these different triangles. And if the angle between the normal and the straight vertical line is under the angle threshold, it marks it as red. And so anything that, obviously, if that normal is pointing downward because the triangle is getting more parallel to the build platform, that angle is getting smaller, and so it's included. Whereas if you drag this up, that's basically saying that my angle of what I call an underhang is now way out here, so it's starting to include all sorts of things. And so we don't need that so high. 25 isn't bad. I see a lot of people going with something more like 35. The contact tolerance, my understanding, it has something to do with what it considers to be in contact with the build platform, but I've messed around with changing this. It doesn't seem to do much. The Y offset is how much off of the build platform. So if you leave this at 0, it's going to print on the build platform. But if you want to raise it up, that's how you would. I'm gonna raise it up just so you can see. So that's at 5. So if I just play around with those and I hit generate supports, you'll see what we get. Okay, so it creates these supports, and you can see throughout here. And actually, let me set those to the defaults. I'm going to generate supports again. I was messing around with these earlier. And so with just the angle threshold, the contact tolerance, and the Y offset, you can see what it's going to create. I'm going to take off the wireframes. So you can see a few things going on here, okay? But it has these supports coming from the base, up, up, up. See how it follows the model, okay? And it's contacting in here. Some things that you can change in the support generator is you can change the angle at which these supports are made. So right now it's at 45 degrees. That means that all of these supports are going to be running at 45 degrees. And so that can cause interesting things. I don't think we need it at 45 degrees. I think we can increase it to, well, I'll do it to 60. And when we do that, I have to remove the supports and hit generate new to see them again. But we'll go ahead and see what that does to changing things. What it's going to do is, instead of my supports going at a 45-degree angle, it's going to upright them, and see how now my supports are kind of sitting more straight up and down. Okay. And notice on the bottom, I'm going to just show this to you, but then I'm going to remove it. See on the bottom where it's creating a load of supports because it's trying to print things flat on the build platform. Now that you see what that's all about, I'm going to take those off. Okay, and notice it goes a lot quicker. All right, so we've got these supports, and that's what the max angle. The density is describing how dense these supports right here can be. And so if we crank that up, notice that there's going to be more supports through here. See that? See how much more dense those supports are? And so you can play around with different settings. I'm going to go to 90. Layer height is talking about how thick your layers are. In dentistry, we rarely print in a 200 micron. Ours is like the most we tend to print at is 100, and often we go even less than that. I'll go at 100 just because it's going to be faster. And then the diameter is these right here. These are considered the posts. So right now they're at 3 millimeters, which for an SLA printer doesn't need to be nearly that. In fact, we can probably go to 1.5 or even less. I'm going to hit this. And so now we've changed the density a little bit, went down a little bit, but then notice that we changed the post diameter. And we probably don't need the density like that with our post diameter being so small. So I'm going to go back to 70 and let's see what that gives us. All right, that doesn't look too bad for supports. And so if you notice in some of these areas, like right here, those are touching the actual support. You can change that in the advanced supports, but then so we did the post diameter. Tip diameter is talking about what the diameter is right here at the tip, and you can change the tip diameter, which we could go with an SLA printer much smaller than that. And so and then the base diameter, I'll change it at the same time, is down here. Notice this right here. We can go, oh sorry, not that. That's not the height, it's the diameter. So this right here, we don't need it at 8. We can go down to 5, and then we'll remove and hit generate supports. So that got a little smaller, but then also the tip of these got just a little bit smaller, which is always nice when you're cleaning up supports, as long as you don't go too small. Okay, so that's that. And then I'm going to hide these, and we're going to look at the advanced supports. This part right here, if I uncheck this, then it stops allowing things like this to happen. Okay, it won't allow me to create those. Let's see. And so see what it's doing now is it's trying to come in from the side to get those supports where you want them to be. Not ideal, obviously. And so, yeah. Well, I'm going to go ahead and allow those. Optimization, I forget what that means. It has something to do with, I think, keeping the supports close to the object. Obviously, as you're listening to me talk, you can realize I don't use this tool. I use the software that comes with the printers that I've used. Solid minimum offset. Trying to remember what that is. I'm not remembering right now. The tip height and the base height is right. The tip height, base height. So you can see that if I bring that up to 2 and I bring that up to 2, then I can strut density, or these little guys, like how dense those struts can be. So we can bring that up. Post sides, notice this is very round. If I drag this down, that's going to make them a lot more square, if you will. And so if you notice right here, so we've got very square looking ones with the tips and the bases have more height to them. So that's various things you can play around with once you're done. And again, I don't use this tool much at all, but you can convert it to a solid. And when you do that, you can either replace these with one STL file or make a new. So if you hit replace existing, obviously if you did replace it, it would just leave these where you could edit them, but then it would create a new one off to the side. This is the part I don't quite understand, is when you come in here, 1, these aren't touching anymore, and 2, I see this too often, that things like this are going on, and I don't know why there's like this weird looking base thing at the bottom. So that's what happens when you do the make solid and then you hit done, and then you can print it with some supports. Okay. The slicing, I'm going to delete this and bring in another one. The slicing tool is, in my understanding, useful if you have a very small piece that you're trying to print. So for example, you can see something's going on right here, but I'm going to back up and I'm going to take this guy and I am going to transform him, where I'm going to bring him down to 10. Okay, so we've got him much, much smaller. And now when we go into the slicing and we come in and zoom in on him, we can see some things. So now that he's a small print, that means all the different parts on him are much smaller. And what these are telling us is that these are areas that the printer is going to struggle with. And it goes off of how, like, think of, get away from the kind of printing we normally do in dentistry with SLA printers. Go to an FDM printer where there's a nozzle that's extruding a material, and this minimum size right here is going to be talking about the how big it can print that. So if my nozzle is a 0.4 millimeter nozzle, I can put my minimum thickness as 0.8, because what that means is it can print 0.8 on one side, come around 0.8 on the other, and it will change where the problems are. You know, the bigger or the smaller the minimum size, the less problems it's going to run into. These areas that are orange are areas that it is going to start having some problems. And so the thinner this goes, the less problems there are. These areas that are yellow, these are areas where you are going to struggle significantly. And obviously if you have a nozzle hitting this right here, that's going to be a problem. And then this here is changing the distance between the layers. So like, for example, if we did 0.05 for 50 microns, you can see that these are all the different layers that are going to struggle with a minimum size of 0.8. You know, if we're comfortable with our printer with a 0.1, notice there's really not any problems up until it gets that last little spot right there. So it really comes down to what you're printing with, but that's what the slicing tool does. It doesn't actually do slicing. It more looks at slices and finds areas that once it's sliced and the printer's trying to go after it, it's going to struggle. So that's the different things here at the bottom. I've never used really any of those. I had to kind of look up a lot of what was in this section of this video. So I apologize if some of that came across a little bit choppy. But if you're interested in using Mesh Mixer to get ready to print an object, there's some extra things to play around with.